Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I've created 3 scarf patterns that are pretty straightforward and simple to do if you're a beginner, but really anyone can do these. The first one I'm going to be showing you how to make is this one, which is my favorite, which is why I'm starting with it, but it's a grid that is reversible. So this side is green or yellow squares with a brown grid, and then this is the inverse of it, so that no matter which way it's facing or like wrapped around you, you still can see a pattern. I love it. I fell in love with this stitch. It's like addicting to do because pattern keeps you engaged, but it's also not too complicated where you're constantly staring at a color chart and like counting endlessly and things like that. So I really think if you decide to make this, you're gonna feel the same way about the stitch. It's amazing. And it also has a cool like almost 3D texture to it because we're working the double crochet on top. You'll see. But I love this one so much. The second one I have a tutorial for is this scarf, which I know I said the first one's my favorite, but this is a really close second for me. The yarn I used for this, I forgot to say, but for this one, it's like an alpaca and wool blend, which has such a pretty drape with the hook size that I used, and it's really soft, but this one is so much softer. I feel like this could be a baby blanket or something. This is created with a Tunisian knit stitch, or like knit look stitch. It's not actually knit. I did use a Tunisian crochet hook for this, but I feel like you could get away with using a regular hook and just duct taping something that's the same like diameter, even like a pencil or something to it, because it's not very long like this way, so you don't need too long of an extension on your hook. I think if you don't have a Tunisian crochet hook set, you still could make this. Again, the drape on this turned out so nice, and I wanted this one to be a little bit skinnier. Also, disclaimer, I like my scarves long because I'm 5'10". I like them to hit kind of around my hip area, and I also like them long enough where you can wrap it like this way and it's not like up here, you know, like there's still like a lot of length on this. This looks crazy with if you're making one of these scarves to wear for the entire season, I think it's worth investing in a really nice yarn. So I can link any of the yarns I used in the description. This one is very simple once you get the stitch down, and I ended up blocking this one, which is another thing I recommend. It just makes them a lot softer and it makes the drape a lot nicer when it's like hanging around your neck like that. Last but not least is this scarf that is made with the moss stitch. To give you some context for this one, when I first started crocheting, I just would buy a ton of acrylic yarn from the craft store, and I have every single color of the rainbow, too much of it, and I've been trying to use it all. So I decided to create this with like a scrap yarn approach, but if you do have yarn that you're buying, or it's more like 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, I think it will look just as good. But I did try to use up as much yarn as I could for this. And this one, originally I was going to weave the ends in, but I ended up leaving them out, and I actually added more yarn so that there's like more fringe down here, and I think it adds just like a cute little touch to the bottom of this. And I would say out of all of these, this one's probably the easiest. This one's easy too once you get the hang of Tunisian crochet, but this one's really easy if you're very new to crochet. I kind of felt like including 3 in one video because once you get a few rows down of each of these stitches, it's the exact same thing for like 100+ rows. So I hope you get some use out of this if you decide to make one of these or all of these. I really love seeing you guys make stuff and share it with me. I've gotten some DMs recently of people that made my beanie from a video I posted, honestly I think a few years ago at this point, but I love seeing what you make, so please share it with me. My Instagram is at eliznuts. Yes, I'm asking you to slide into my DMs. Show me what you make. That's all I have to say. Here's how to make the first scarf. For the first scarf, I'm using Drops Nepal yarn in this brown and yellow color. This is a worsted weight yarn, and then I'm also using a 5.5mm hook. It recommends a 5mm hook, but I went up half a size just to add a little more drape to the scarf. I am creating a slip knot and then throwing that on my hook, and then you're going to start by chaining 34 chains. Once you have 34 chains, you are going to chain 2 more as your turning chain. when we do our row of double crochets, we're going to include this yellow yarn and carry it across so that it's ready for us at the other side when we want to change colors. So into the third chain from your hook, you're going to turn your chain over and work a double crochet into the back bump of that stitch and include that yellow yarn into your stitch. Continuing again with another double crochet into the back loop of that chain, adding in that yarn that you're carrying. You're doing this down the entire row, double crocheting into the back bump of that chain, adding in the yarn you're carrying. Once you've worked all the way down that row and you have one stitch left, give that yarn you carried a tug just so that it's not tightening your work at all. So I'm kind of just pulling my row, pulling my tail, and making sure that nothing is pulling and cinching. Then into the last stitch, I work my last double crochet, still carrying that yellow yarn, but I'm not going to fully finish it. So I yarn over and pull through 2, and then with those 2 loops left on my hook, I'm going to change colors. So I pull that brown yarn behind me and I grab the yellow yarn, finishing that stitch with my yellow, and I'm just adjusting the brown yarn by pulling it a tiny bit to make sure that stitch is tight. Then I chain 1 and I turn my work. Now we're going to be carrying that yarn again. This time it's the brown yarn, so I'm kind of pulling that behind me, getting it ready next to my stitches to work into. Then for this row, we're going to be working in the front loops only. So a full row of double crochets, front loops only, carrying the brown yarn. Here you can see I'm kind of tipping my hook forward and stabbing it from the front and grabbing my carrying yarn. I'm not grabbing the back loops. So if I turn it to the back, you'll see those back loops sticking out because we're going to end up working into those later. Then on your last stitch, you're going to actually work into both of the loops. So forget the front loop, we're working into both, just so that the last stitch is a little more secure since it's going to be on the end. And that's actually the chain 2. So I'm working into the last chain 2 that was from our original foundation row. Again, right before I change color, I'm going to make sure that my work is not pulled tight like this. That carried yarn can get kind of tight or too loose and it can stick out. So you just want to tug not too tight, but just a little bit to make everything relaxed and make sure that nothing is pulling, because once we change color, it kind of locks it into place. So I'm picking up my new color, my brown, and I'm finishing that last yellow double crochet and chaining 1. This is where things get a little bit different. So for the very first stitch, we're going to work a double crochet into both loops. Again, the first and last stitch of every row will be through both loops. And I'm just doing a normal double crochet, making sure to carry that yellow yarn. Then on my second stitch, if you look below the yellow double crochet, there's that previous back loop that we left behind from the brown double crochet row. We're going to work into that space. So taking my yarn back on my hook, I'm yarning over twice because we're going to be doing a treble crochet, inserting my hook into that loop from the row below, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. That's a tongue twister. And since this treble crochet is kind of acting on top of that second yellow double crochet, we're going to be skipping that stitch. Then into the next 3 stitches, we're going to be working double crochets into the back loops only. So the first 2 rows we were working with the front loops, but from here on out, anytime you do a double crochet, it's going to be in the back loop, always carrying the yarn. So the pattern is a treble, 3 double, a treble, 3 double. So I'm going to continue with another treble, looking in that next yellow double crochet, but below it into the brown row with that available loop. And you want to make sure that you're skipping that secret little double crochet behind the treble and working your double crochets into the next one. Continuing down, back loop, double crochets. Finding that next stitch and going to the brown row below it, working a treble. And once you finish your last treble crochet, there still should be one more stitch to the left where you are going to finish your last double crochet. So on either side, the very first and the very last stitch is going to be just a single double crochet through both loops, making sure that you carry that yarn. Before you pull through 2 on the very last step, remember to slightly tug your work so that nothing is pulling and things don't get uneven, and then switching colors to finish that stitch. Then we're chaining 1 and turning our work. And now it's the yellow color's turn to do the treble crochets. So it's the same exact thing we just did, starting with just a plain double crochet through both loops on the end, and then beginning our pattern of 1 treble crochet. So now that we've done that alternating pattern on the other side, you'll see these little yellow gaps show up. So it becomes pretty easy to figure out where you're going to insert your hook. And you want to make sure you're inserting your hook in the actual stitch and not the carried yarn, because they're both going to run parallel. Make sure it's the actual stitch here, not the loose carried yarn. And then I'm just continuing a treble crochet, skipping that brown stitch behind it, and it's pretty obvious you're just working in those 3 double crochets right on top in the back loops. Continuing the pattern here where you see that open gap, insert your hook. And finish your treble crochet. And then 3 double. Same thing as the row before. Once you finish your last treble, there should be room for 1 more stitch, which is just going to be a basic double crochet through both loops, making sure to include the carried yarn. And then before finishing that stitch, give it a tug and grab your new color. I continued this for 139 rows, but feel free to make it as long or as short as you want, and this is the finished product. For the second scarf, I'm using Purl Soho's super soft merino wool and an 8mm Tunisian crochet hook. And this hook has a cord that you can screw on and off. I'm just using the shortest extension that my set came with, and then I also screwed on a little stopper at the bottom so that my work doesn't fall off. And here's the information on this yarn. It's a bulky or chunky weight yarn. Start by making a slip knot and throwing that on your hook. And then create a foundation row of 19 chains. And then once you've chained 19, go ahead and chain one more, and that's going to act as our turning chain. Now we're going to work into the second chain from our hook into the back bumps. So you can kind of rotate your chain, and we're going to be pulling up loops through the entire row. So if you insert your hook into the bump, you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. Now in Tunisian crochet, there are forward passes and return passes. So for your forward pass, you're just going to be pulling up loops all the way down. For the return pass, you're going to yarn over and pull through one. This kind of acts as a turning chain. But from here on out, you're going to yarn over and pull through two, all the way down the row. For our next row, you'll notice that there are these vertical bars all the way down, and we're actually going to be working in between those vertical bars. But pay close attention because we have a front vertical bar and then we have one kind of peeking through the back. So you'll see if I pull this apart really tight, there's almost like a loop that you're going to be sticking your hook into. And you'll see if I stick my hook in there, you get the front vertical bar pushed to the left and the back vertical bar gets pushed to the right. So skipping the first one into the second vertical bar, I'm inserting my hook. And pulling up a loop. You're going to repeat this all the way down the row until you reach the very last vertical bar. And then once you reach the end of your row, rotate your work to the side and insert your hook into these two loops on the end. They almost look like a chain, like you're working into a normal stitch, but you're going to want to insert your hook there and pull up your last loop. And then this return pass is going to be the same as the last one, so you yarn over and pull through one as your turning chain, and then the rest of the way down, yarn over and pull through two. Continue the same pattern for the rest of the scarf. You're going to be skipping that first vertical bar, working into the second, pulling up a loop all the way down, yarning over, pulling through one as your turning chain, and then yarning over and pulling through two the rest of the way. I honestly don't know how many rows I did for this because it's really hard to count these types of stitches, but you can make it as long as you want. Just keep trying it on periodically throughout your crocheting. To cast off on the last row of the forward pass, you're going to be inserting your hook, pulling up a loop, and then pulling that loop through the one on your hook. So pretend this is a finished scarf as long as you want it to be. On the last forward pass, insert your hook, pull up a loop, and kind of slip stitch that through the loop on your hook. Then at the very end on your last slip stitch, do one extra chain, cut the yarn, and then pull that yarn through the chain to tie it off just like you would with any other normal crochet piece. Here's what the finished product looks like. And I highly recommend blocking this because as you work up this stitch, it kind of has a tendency to build slightly on a diagonal, but with this wool yarn, it responded really well to blocking and ended up turning out pretty straight, as you can see here. So I highly recommend blocking this stitch. It really loosens up all the fibers and helps it lay flat and relaxed and gives it a really nice drape. For the third scarf, I used an 8mm hook and a bunch of random acrylic weight 4 scrap yarn. And for the colors, I'm working with 2 strands at a time, so I just kind of paired up colors that I thought looked similar but were slightly different so that it added a little bit of dimension to the scarf. So grab whatever color 2 strands of yarn you're going to work with and create a slip knot and then throw it on your hook. And for my actual scarf, I chained 170. Again, make it however long or short you want, but for the sake of just showing you how to do this stitch, I only chained 10. Whatever number you end up choosing, make sure it's an even number. Then into the second chain from our hook, again working in the back bumps, I'm gonna do a single crochet and then a chain. Then skipping the next chain, I'm working into the third chain and doing another single crochet. So every chain that I do, I'm skipping a stitch below. And then I chained, again skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, and that is the end of our row. But before you finish that single crochet, when you still have 2 loops left on your hook, that's when you're going to grab your new color and we're going to work into those open chain spaces. So I have my blue, I am bringing that in to finish that brown single crochet and just pulling to adjust to make sure nothing is super loose, and then I'm chaining 2. Then I turn my work and into the open chain space, so below the brown chains that we made, I'm inserting my hook into that hole and doing a single crochet, following it with a chain and skipping a stitch, which the stitch I'm skipping is that single crochet, so I'm only ever working into chain spaces. Single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, and then to finish our row we will do one last single crochet and not finish it because we're going to add our new color. So since I decided to leave some fringe at the end of the scarf, I decided not to weave my ends in, so in order to secure them, I'm just tying them in a knot. And you'll see later that you really can't see this, and it makes your life so much easier in the end. Then back finishing that last single crochet with my new color, pulling it a little bit to adjust, and chaining 2. Same as before, skipping that first single crochet, working into the chain space, single crochet and chain, skipping a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, single crochet, chain, skip a stitch, and then finishing with a single crochet, and then we'll add our new color in. And this is the same pattern that you're going to follow for the entirety of the scarf. Every now and then looking to our ends, just tying them in a knot to secure them so that they don't come undone. And go crazy and do as many rows as you want. My finished scarf had 19 rows, and look how gorgeous it is. I love it. And this fringe on the end is looking a little sparse, so to fill it in, for every color I have, every row I have, I'm adding another strand of doubled up yarn. So I'm inserting my hook at a random, it doesn't need to be precise, a random loop at the end that's brown, and I'm fishing through a spare little cut of brown yarn. And once you pull it through, make sure you pull really tight to secure it. I'm repeating that here because my next row is blue, so I'm fishing through some blue yarn and pulling that through really tight. Again, with green, that's my next row. I think you get the idea. Just complete this all the way down. Here is what it should look like once you add another piece of yarn for all of your rows. It makes it super thick, and you want to just comb it out with your fingers and then trim it to whatever length you like. Mine ended up being around 2 inches, I think, but you can leave it as long or as short as you want. And here is the finished product. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you make any of these 3 scarves, please tag me on Instagram or DM it to me or tag me on TikTok too. I'm on there more than I should be. And follow me on Instagram and subscribe for more videos. I'm planning to be a lot more active because it's cold out and I'm actually making things, and I feel my creative juices flowing, like I might have something to actually add to the internet that's not already there. So bye.